Hi everyone, welcome to yet another webinar with Careers 360 on communicating effectively in English. So, being able to communicate effectively is a prerequisite for functioning well in all areas of life, be it studies, work, or relationship. In the modern world, we invariably have to communicate with other people in English, and English is often the most common denominator amongst people from different backgrounds. So, to help us understand how we can go about communicating effectively in English, I am very happy to welcome Miss Usha Pandit as our speaker for today. Miss Usha Pandit has over 3 decades of academic experience in K-12 teaching. She has authored 40 books, of which 8 grammar books are used in mainstream schools. She is founder CEO, Mindsprings Publishing. Mindsprings provides quality consultancy to schools in the areas of curriculum diagnosis, planning, teacher training, academic audit, and quality control. A much sought after teacher trainer and a champion of gifted education, she has also produced 100 YouTube videos on her channel, The Mindsprings English Teacher, of which the grammar videos are very popular. We welcome you, ma'am. Thank you so much for sparing your time and joining us today. And without any further ado, I would request you to please take over and take us through the presentation which you have for us. Post that, we will open the floor for questions and answers.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be here with your students. So today we are going to talk about communicating in English. I believe you are students who are in grades 8, 9, 10 upwards, perhaps. So you already are speaking and writing in English. I assume that you're doing well. And I'm going to speak generally about the need for good English, which I think Varidhi has already kind of summarized in what she said, but I think we'll go into a little more detail. And I'll also give you tips on how you can get your English up and running and bettered, because it's a journey. It's not something that people just learn and they say, okay, we are done with this. You continue to learn and you continue to grow with the language. So I've got a PPT to keep me on track mainly, otherwise I'll end up talking a lot and I'll lose my time limit. So I thought I'll share this, share the screen with you, take you through this video so that I mainly keep on track. That's the main purpose of sharing this with you. So, okay, so communicating effectively in English, and I'm doing this with Careers 360 now. So language is a vehicle of thought and influence. Okay, this is something to remember. So language is not something where you write a paper, but it's a vehicle. And if your language is impressive, then you are successful, because that's the first point of contact. So when you apply for a job, it's the writing, and when you go for an interview, it's the speaking that you do that actually impresses people. So you cannot afford, no matter what stream you get into. So you might go into an IIT stream and say English is not a paper that's important. But English is not about the paper that you give. English is a life skill. And it is non-negotiable for success. So wherever you go, you need the language in order to communicate. So English is the popular language of science and library, research, technology. All of these things are in English. So even if they tell you that do your, school in mother tongue because it's easy, when you come and you hit your engineering college or your higher studies, you'll switch to English. And those kind of switches, sudden switches in language are not easy. The best language is picked up at the bottom. So most of us are very fluent in our mother tongue because we learned it before the age of 2 or 3. That is why we are so efficient in that language. So the earlier you do language, the better. But even if you haven't done a great job with language so far, there are ways in which you can improve, and you really need to work on it and not keep language shelved and start doing other things to the exclusion of language. So that's what I'm talking to you about. So communication in English, especially in India, is critical because it's a linked language. So we are coming from various states and we wouldn't be able to talk to one another if it were not for English. So it's a linked language. It's what you call the lingua franca. We wouldn't be able to communicate without English. So that's something to remember. We wouldn't be able to have the mobility to work across states, and indeed, we wouldn't get jobs abroad. So there are so many aspects of English as a language, not just for communication, but also for mobility, also for growth, also for success, that you cannot afford to give it the go by. Okay. So there are no shortcuts, there are no substitutes for practice. The only way you can master language is by using it. You cannot do it any other way. You cannot do it through grammar. You can certainly not do it through grammar. You need to be fluent in the language, which means you need to be able to speak the language first, above all else. Because if you can't speak the language, you can't go around passing chits of paper to communicate in written language, can you? And therefore, spoken language becomes critical. So if your speech is not fluent, make sure that you work on it and do some of the stuff that I'm going to talk to you about. It doesn't have to happen overnight. It can happen over a period of time. Now, the other thing to remember is that there are several neurological pathways through which we learn a language. So our brain thinks and our eyes see and our ears hear and our tongue speaks and our hand, when we write, has a memory. So every body part almost has a memory for learning. So doing something in a very narrow space where you say, I'm going to do question answers and I'm going to do meanings and I'm going to do grammar and I'm going to do exercises and worksheets. One of the reasons why school is not very successful in delivering language is because it's very narrow. Everything is exam oriented. Everything is about getting 99.9% marks. But the 99.9% marks is not going to help you to speak or to communicate or to negotiate or to influence. So therefore, this is something that we need to be aware of, that all of these pathways will help us to master language. Good writing does not automatically mean that you speak well. See, this is another complication. So if you say, oh, he writes so well or she writes so well, and therefore she must be a very good speaker, you might be extremely disappointed, and vice versa. If you're a good speaker, it doesn't mean that you write well. So you've got different kinds of skill areas that come into play when you write and when you speak. So these are some of the complexities of learning English. Okay. Before you say that, oh, we wish we could speak in an Indian language, as I told you, we don't have a common Indian language. And we are, in a way, fortunate that we have a very popular international language that was almost given to us by the, British as a legacy. And I think we should take it as an advantage that we are forced to speak English simply because we don't have a common language. And that's in the long run, I think you should see it as a blessing. Fluency must be practiced. And if you know English, it does not mean that you are fluent. So you may say, oh, I know English, I can write and I can understand, and I can read. That doesn't mean you're fluent. Fluency is when you speak without stopping. Fluency is when your tongue does the speaking and your mind, you have a thought, you have an idea, you have a feeling which you want to communicate, and it is automatic. That's what we mean by fluency. If you're not a fluent speaker, then that is from where you get nervousness and you get stage fright and you get anxious. All of these come from a certain lack of fluency. So start building fluency even if you know English. So let's look at some super tips for English. So read aloud from a good newspaper, magazine, or book. Now you might say, oh, that's such a childish thing to do. Who's going to read aloud? But you must. Because when you read aloud, your tongue and your eyes and your brain and your ears, all of these are active when you read aloud because you're hearing it. The mind always looks for meaning. So if you read silently, what happens is your mind is only looking for particular words in order to make meaning. So if you say, man arrested for corruption, if you just get corruption, man arrested, then that's done. Meaning is done, and you're not going to read the whole sentence. But when you read it aloud, you have to read the entire sentence, and that's how you get fluent. So the tongue needs to have the practice of saying words and structures in a flow. It will not come if you read silently. You can read 10,000 books. It will not give you fluency unless the tongue is doing the talking. View good spoken material, news, interviews, talk shows, debates, YouTube programs. Listening is very important. Now, when you listen, you need to listen mindfully. You need to start looking at how do people speak? How do they use vocabulary? What are they saying and how do we say it? So you might find that a whole bunch of words that should be there, vocabulary that should be there in order to speak succinctly, in order to speak meaningfully, is not available to you, or they don't download. See? So words must download straight onto your tongue. You cannot sit when you are speaking and start thinking of what was that word? Oh, I can't remember. You can't do this. See, you don't have a second. That's what I mean by spoken fluency. And spoken fluency is very seductive, very attractive, and extremely successful in getting you what you want. So don't take it lightly. So all these spoken materials are excellent if you listen to it mindfully. Do not let it pass. Don't look for meaning. Think about how they are saying it. Watch entertainment, movies, shows, serials. So everything that I'm telling you here is fun to do. So it's not like, it's going to be it's a big pain in the neck. Oh, I have to do so much grammar. I have to write so many pages. It's none of that. I'm asking you to hear a lot of the language, because listening is not an activity that is actively promoted. In schools, we don't have a test for it. We don't have a viva. And these are some of our drawbacks in school. So when you don't have those kind of papers, what happens? You end up not being able to speak and not being able to pick up the language as you should. So that's something that you should be able to do on your own. Sing songs, the lyrics have structures. So when you sing a song, there's sentences there are structures there, and you won't go wrong. You won't go wrong with the subject-verb agreement. You will not go wrong with certain words and phrases that go together. All of these will come to you naturally because you are listening to a lot of English. Listen mindfully and build vocabulary so that you're not searching for words. Building vocabulary is critical. In fact, I often tell teachers that you must speak good language in a classroom. So if you're just saying, open the book to page 36, turn the page, answer these questions, your English itself is not allowing children to pick up from you as the expert certain words and phrases. So it's very important to listen to good vocabulary and to build your own vocabulary so that you are not searching for words. And guess it from the meaning. So vocabulary, please do not run to a dictionary. Don't try to look up the meaning. Look at the context and say, what can it mean? If there is a word like alleged, okay, so it is alleged that he was corrupt. What could that word alleged mean? So first of all, it comes from a certain field of crime, isn't it? Because you're using the word corrupt. And you possibly, after that, you might have an arrest, or you might have something like that suggests to you that this is from the field of crime. It's very important to intelligently understand meaning. Meaning should not be understood from a dictionary. And definitely, vocabulary should not be learned where you learn 50 words and you wrote them and then you decide to use them. It never works like that. Meaning, words, and ideas, all of these structures, they must go together and work together in order to have fluency. So build vocabulary, guess the meanings, and then go to the dictionary if you like, and then check out whether it's, whether it's the right thing that you guessed. Most of the meanings, guys, are sitting in good and bad, advantage, disadvantage. It's just that. You don't have to have the dictionary meanings at all. If you've understood whether what is being conveyed is either black or white, I think you're mostly done. Okay, think about words and think about how what I'm saying here, and you'll realize that it's that simple actually. So when you read the newspaper, there are many words that you read, you don't run to the dictionary, but they become part of your lexicon simply because you've read it so many times and you've heard it here and there, and that's how we pick up language. Write blogs on social media, comment on them, read good blogs. All of these are very good. Now, you guys, when you are going into your higher studies, one of the areas that you should concentrate on is report writing. So you are not going to be asked to write a story anywhere, but you are going to be asked to write a report or make a presentation, and all of that requires formal language. Now, formal language is something that is not taught adequately in schools, but it will come to you if you read. If you read that newspaper aloud, whether you're reading politics or entertainment or sport, you will catch it simply because the way in which it is written has got a reported diction and you need to catch that. Okay. So remember this, that you need to read a lot of reported reports on anything. It can be an accident, it can be an arrest, it can be let's say the chess Olympiad that is happening in Chennai. And one great thing about the newspaper is when you read the newspaper, you automatically also get a lot of general knowledge, which is very important. So I think it kills many birds with one stone, and therefore reading that newspaper every day for about 20 minutes is absolutely essential. Think in English. So you should be able to think again, long sentences in English. If you're an early speaker, you'll have sentences like I'm feeling hungry. But if you are a speaker who wants to better yourself, then you need to start thinking in terms of longer ideas. So if I ask myself a question, do you think democracy is a better, form of government than dictatorship? So if I ask a question to myself, then how do I frame my sentences? Might be something that I might want to do. I might keep a video and I might look at it and then frame my sentence, or frame my sentence and then look at the video to see how other people have said it. So you need to take a little bit of trouble, all at your own pace, at your own time, without really getting stressed. But it is an agenda that you should have no matter which stream you are going to get into for university. Do not neglect language, because that will hit you at a later stage. You'll get into a job, you'll find that you are not fluent, and that will cause you to feel very inadequate and probably a little inferior to other people, which you really don't want to do. Use it in everyday language. As I said, if you pick up a new word, use it in your language in everyday life, or create a situation where you can use that word, and using is very important. So letters, presentations, conversations, wherever you can, make sure you use these new words. If you don't use the word and you just know the meaning, it will fade because it's not being used. So words need to become friends, and then they need to become family, and then they need to become your own kind of really the closest of kin. Think of words like that. Make recordings and celebrate success instead. So you can actually look at how fluent you are now. So make a recording. Nowadays, all of us have got phones and we can make recordings. So make a recording of yourself today. Check out how fluent you are. Take a topic and talk onto the camera and check how it comes through. And then after you do all these things, you check again after 2 months and again after 2 months. And you'll be able to actually chart kind of a graph by which you can see that you are actually making progress. So you don't, in the digital age, you don't really need a large number of teachers or anything. What you need is the determination and will to follow through. Okay. So these are some of the tips that I want to give you. This is the mainstay of what I want to say today. Vocabulary building, you should catch yourself struggling, you should repair it, you should practice. If you struggle, you must make a note of that struggle. Don't let it go. The people listening to you will catch the meaning. Even if you say 2 words, they will be able to fill the gaps and catch the meaning. So they won't stop you and criticize you or say what or anything. But you need to be self-critical. You need to ask yourself, I had to stop. I was not quite able to, say what I wanted to? Where did I fall? You need to have a lot of reflection. Okay, otherwise you won't make it, and you need to practice once you get it. Now you have, let's say you have got a parent-child conflict. You're talking about a parent and child conflict in a discussion. So you will have students who express in a very banal way. So it's not like they don't know English, but they say things like, my parents say no. They go on telling me what to do. They say, if I give you a chocolate, you listen to me. They are very cunning. This kind of language. This is not the kind of language that you can use later on as adults in a good setting where you consider yourself a good speaker of English. You need to have a vocabulary for speaking accurately and fluently. And what are they? I would say my parents are obstinate, insistent. They put their foot down. They refuse. See the difference in the language. Instead of saying my parents say no. See, that's childish almost. But a lot of people who think they can speak English will be at that level or maybe slightly higher than that because they don't know these words. My parents' mandate or diktat is non-negotiable. They dictate, they dominate. We have boundaries. We rebel, we resent, we revolt. See, this is vocabulary. This is strength. So when you speak like that, then it becomes crystal clear. There is a clash of wills, a tug of war, a confrontation. It is infradig for them. So there are these small foreign words that you can throw in that actually creates a lot of meaning. You can also put in phrasal verbs, idiomatic expressions. All of these need to come in. I've got a fantastic book called Writing with Ease. So you will get it on Amazon. You will also get it on my website, which I'll put out for you. That's a book that has a huge amount of vocabulary. And that's something that you should be looking at buying because it's something you will use all your life. So they're constantly nagging, they have expectations, etc. So you have huge incentives, quid pro quos. Now, if you don't know these words, now if you're waiting for this to occur in one of your textbook texts or in your poems, it's going to be a long wait. So English needs to be widely read, widely experienced, a lot of hearing, a lot of different subjects. This is very important. We throw tantrums, they're inflexible, unbending. Just look at the number of words I put there for where the children just said, my parents say no, and they're telling me what to do kind of language. So I'm just giving you an example here of how vocabulary makes a difference. So what should I use? I should use good grammatical structures. So if your tongue has not been saying certain words, had I known that she would have been there, I might have. There's a structure. So if you're not using structures like that, if you're using banal structures, you're using everyday structures that you hear on a daily basis, it's not enough. So you need to have more structures that are formal, structures that are in reported speech. All of those good structures is something that you need, and you'll only get it from good magazines and newspapers. And you need to kind of say them again and again so that you get some structure practice. Role play, drama, games, television shows, audio. I'm just giving you a whole bunch of stuff that you can use, movies, clips. All of these are great materials in order to learn English. So it's not a textbook. It's not even reading 10,000 books. So people say, read. It's not enough. Read aloud, read for meaning, speak it. All of these are very important, some of which you might not have known before. So everyday transactions. Now, this is a bunch of transactions that we use every day, okay, for English. So we agree, we disagree, we provide solutions, we give advice, encouragement. So look at all that, directions, introducing a friend, interrupting some. For everything you need expression. How are you going to do it? Suppose I say you've got to interrupt that person. What are you going to say besides excuse me? So excuse me is one of those very popular and very common expressions. But there are several ways in which you can say the same thing. So it might be a good idea to actually look at each of these and say, what are the various ways in which we can say something? Because there are many ways of saying the same thing. Let me see if I have a slide of that. Various ways of saying the same thing. For example, what kind of question construction can you do? For if you're seeking opinions, okay? So I might want your opinion and I might say, do you believe in something? Or I might say, do you think we should? Do you think we should take a vote on this? Would you consider banking this check if it were unstable? So I might use it in many ways. So it's very, very important for me to look at all of these expressions are about asking for opinion, asking about doubt, suggesting something. So take a look at how language works. Questioning is very important because in schools you don't question, you're busy answering questions, aren't you? So you don't know how to ask questions. But asking a question is as important as answering them. So therefore, the structures of questions are very, very important and is not available to most students because where do you ask questions? You never ask questions, you only answer them. So therefore, guys, question construction and all that, those transactions that I talked to you about, make sure that you try and get those structures and practice them so that you are, really fluent. So when you want to ask something, it's there for you. You're not thinking about how to ask, or you're not making a statement and putting an inflection upwards to make it a question. A lot of very, well-educated people make these mistakes. They don't ask proper questions. So instead of saying, are you for or against the motion, they'll say, you are for or against. See, you can't ask you are is a statement. But a lot of people do this. So these are some of the things to remember, common mistakes in English, common spelling mistakes that are made. These are areas that you should be scrutinizing in the YouTube videos. And there are a large number of people who are there to help you for free, actually. And you really need to start looking at those quite seriously. So when you were young, did you play football? Also the pace of speaking. When you speak, you need to have a certain pace. When you were young, did you play football? Did you play football is where you are stressing every bit of that sentence. So it doesn't give you fluency. Every language has a rhythm. You need to catch the rhythm. So this is something that you need to look at. You can listen to native speakers. You can listen to very good Indian speakers. I wouldn't listen to native speakers because then you start, you start copying their accent. You don't need to copy their accent. Our accent is pretty good. We just need to make sure that the rhythms of English are available to us and that our pronunciations are good standard English and that we are fluent. So no, I used to play cricket. Do you want to watch the match today? Do you want to watch the match today? Not today, I have a lot of work to do. So see, I have a lot of work to do. I have a lot of work to do. You need to say it. Otherwise, it won't come through properly, especially if your English is not very proficient as yet. If you had been there, you would have had fun. Now, that's a strong structure, a fairly complicated structure. Now, a lot of Indians don't use structures like this. There are more. I've just given you a few samples. Maybe next time I'll go with you. So ordinary language that should be used in everyday English is simply not available in our societies because we speak a kind of a mix of rather pidgin English. That's something that you need to correct. So book and video resources, guys, to help. You can watch my videos on YouTube. It's called the Mind Springs English Teacher. It's got a lot of grammar. Grammar, unfortunately, whether you like it or not, is something that people are using these days in order to eliminate. So if you've got 22 lakh students coming in for 16,000 or 1,600 seats, the easiest way for people to eliminate you is by giving you a small grammar, a hard, tough grammar, question, so that if you don't answer it, then they can eliminate you straight away. So grammar becomes important. Grammar becomes important even if you have to go abroad and answer one of those, papers that give you a grade for proficiency in order to let you into the country. So grammar is not something that we can wish away, and grammar is easy if it is taught properly. It isn't. And that's the reason why grammar becomes a nightmare for a lot of people. So you might want to look at the grammar, and the 10 tips is what I took from what I told you about I've done in Hindi. You might want to look at that. There's this book, Writing with Ease, and there are Language with Ease books. I would take the higher grades of 5, 6, 7. Answer keys are on Kindle, and those are really long grammar sentences, which will help you to do a lot of good grammar. So it's something that you can work with at home. So you don't have to, wait for schools to subscribe. Some schools, of course, subscribe, but others don't. But it's very important because it's your life, it's your career, and it's very important that you work on your own skills, because there's no point in blaming anybody else afterwards. So I'm stopping share here because I've finished with my video. Now I can take your questions.
Yeah, ma'am, I will want to read out the questions to you. So
Sure. Go ahead.
So one of our students wants to know, how can we feel and appear more confident while talking in English?
That's what I'm saying. So if you are not fluent in English, so you cannot put on a cloak of confidence. So I cannot now say, okay, now let me look confident. Let me act confident. Because the minute I open my mouth, if I'm going to stutter and stumble, none of you are going to even listen to me. See? But if I don't, not only will you listen to me, if I put out another 4 programs, you will come. So that's how it works. So confidence cannot be done. I know people tell you, oh, appear confident, be confident and all. Trust me, if you're talking to people who really have quality, they will catch you immediately. They will know that you are blundering through. So my point is, I'm not saying that you should be in that place immediately, because that won't be possible. All I'm saying is you need to work on yourself to get better and better. But that work is something that you need to put in, because it will happen. Trust me, it will happen. We have not even taken 3 steps forward. So you need to do it every day. Every day, read. That reading is easy. 20 minutes of reading you should read. And I'm telling you, once the flow of words start coming, you will feel more and more confident. Once you start reading better stuff and you get ideas, you will be more confident, because you're smarter, you're intelligent, you're informed. That's how confidence comes. No? Confidence is not something that you can wear like a cloak. Confidence has to come from inside. And it will come when you're informed. So keep a book, write down ideas, look at good stuff. So instead of watching that thriller, watch something that's going to give you a few ideas. Use those ideas. So all those will help you to gain confidence, and it will happen. You just need to, you can't get it overnight, but you can start working on it. Okay?
All right, ma'am. So the next question is also from the same student. You had mentioned a point about thinking in English, right? So the student probably wants to know, how do we acquire a habit of thinking in English? Because by default, it comes in our mother tongue only.
Yeah, so that's exactly what you need to kind of change by sort of being aware. So if I'm aware, so how do you think in your mother tongue? You're probably saying, कल मुझे मार्केट जाना चाहिए, ऐसा लगता है कि बहुत सारी चीजें लेनी है. You might be thinking like this in Hindi. Now you need to change that and start thinking in English. You need to be able to say that I need to pay a visit to the market. There are a huge number of things that I need to buy. Now, if you are a person who is floundering in English, then you will have to write it down and then say it. So you'll have to take a little trouble over it, or you'll have to write it down and get it corrected from someone. Which is why I'm saying, if you read the newspaper, what happens, it's already corrected and sitting there. So you will be able to speak it better. There are a whole bunch of words. For example, when I write, I always tell people my pen does the writing. So if I had to sit and think of everything that I write, I'd never get finished. So my pen does the writing, and very often I will write a word that I've never written before. And then I go and look it up in the dictionary to check whether I was right and 99% of the time it will be right. Because that word is something that I have picked up in my readings somewhere, And now it's sitting in my head. And when I'm writing that sentence structure, it's popping out. So that will happen to you also. Trust me. It's just ask yourself, how much work have I done so far? That's important. Before you start, throwing in the towel, as they say, and giving up, you need to ask yourself, how much work have I done so far? Have you done lots of work and you're still at a place where, you are struggling? Or have you not done much work at all? That's the question. Now, if you've done a lot of work doing grammar exercises, trust me, it's a waste of time. You should understand grammar, and you should understand the nuances of grammar and see when I change an adverb, what happens to the sentence. And if I put other adjectives, I can either make it positive or negative. You need to have an intelligent way of doing grammar. It should not be for labeling things, because nobody will catch you in the middle of the road and say, oh, tell me, is this an adverb? Nobody will do that. Nobody. So don't waste a huge amount of time doing stuff that is wasteful, right? So thinking in English will come from first read in English, and then it will come. And then thinking in English, deliberately think in English. Whatever it is, when you get up in the morning, say, I wonder what I'm going to do today. See, so when you say, I wonder what I'm going to do today, oh, I've got a pretty busy day. I wonder how I'm going to finish all this work. Start thinking like this, no? Think simple sentences, manageable sentences, and think it in your head. So then it becomes a habit. Whenever I have to start wondering about what I'm going to do, that sentence starts popping up in my head. It's a process, guys. It's not going to happen overnight. I promise you. It takes a little bit of trouble, but you will get there. What else?
Yeah. So, ma'am, this is a question from a student named Rishu. He wants to know how can he work on improving his writing skill.
So writing is easier than speaking. So that's some consolation, because you get time when you write, right? So I would say buy writing with ease, because it's got all the genres. See, writing again is not done. Because I'm a school consultant, and because I meet thousands of teachers, and because I train them, I can take responsibility for schools not having done what they should do. It's indeed very sad, but that's the truth. So for example, in writing, we haven't kind of thought about the genres of writing. We haven't thought about the kind of target language or target vocabulary that you need when you write. So therefore, writing becomes like just the example that I gave you of my parents say no. I just showed you that. So if you write like that, it becomes colloquial. It becomes banal. But if I use words like resent, dictate, diktat, infradig, then automatically the writing starts jumping up. So if I'm writing something, and if I just take all my nouns, and if I add an adjective in front of it, a good adjective, or if I take all my verbs and put an adverb in front of it, the writing will pick up dramatically. It's that simple. But if you don't know this, and if you are not aware of it, and if you are not going to very deliberately start making those changes, then it won't happen. Now, in your formal letters or in your formal writing, there are certain structures that you can simply memorize. So if you're writing a formal letter, you can simply memorize it, because everybody writes that. Right? You don't write letters in very many different ways. This is to bring to your notice that we have been given a grant. Is a structure. This is to bring to your notice. This is to bring to your notice. We don't write 100 ways of writing that. So there are certain things that you can simply memorize, and it is worth memorizing, because then your letter writing becomes good. Right? Similarly, presentations or the language of negotiation, the language of persuasion, there are languages. So those languages are worth memorizing and using, right? So if you do that, then the English automatically becomes better. Get writing with ease, I'm telling you guys. It's got all these languages. And that will help you to form sentences, to write letters better, to make presentations better. And be mindful. Do not say, I know everything and jump in. Sometimes I just changing singular to plural, the thing goes completely wrong. There are a whole bunch of videos that I have made on mistakes that are made in English. Take a look at that. So look at the videos. That will help you, because I'm actually teaching with a board, and that will help you to gain some insights into vocabulary and structure. What else?
Ma'am, another question that we have is probably this has come from a parent. How should we effectively go about teaching, how should we go about teaching English to a child step by step? What should be a step by step approach, starting from a younger age?
So there is no step by step approach. Okay, this is something that again school has done, something wrong that school has done.
Okay.
So, for example, I have a series of pre-primary books, which I just wrote just before the lockdown, and they've just started getting into schools now. So, one of the things that, for example, if you're starting with the pre-primary child, your main idea is you have to teach ABC, and then go on to 2-letter word, then 3-letter word. This is how we think. This is called step by step. This is wrong. Because when you learn your own mother tongue, when you have a child, do you stand over the cradle and say, "Bacha bolo kha, ka se kamal, kha se khargosh"? Do you do this? Never. What do? You talk around the child. Everything. The child is less than a year old, you gossip, you shout, you scream, you laugh, you fight, everything you do around the child. And that child picks up the language before he's 2. Across the world, all children, rich and poor, pick up the mother tongue. Because it is taught, it is not taught, it is just exposed holistically. So if you go to try to get into a lot of steps, you will never get there. It's always wrong. So, for example, the grammar books that I have, Language with Ease, what I do is I give you an entire sentence to parse. So, for example, in grade 1, you may not get the adverb and all that. I'll underline a few words and I'll say, do only this. But the child is exposed to the entire sentence. So, the whole book is working on 100 sentences a year that the child parses and then manipulates. So, if it's a big house, and I say, what is big? Big is an adjective. Then you change it into well-ventilated, red-roofed, beautifully lit, whatever. So you will have a whole bunch of spacious, magnificent, all adjectives. But that's vocabulary. Now, grammar and vocabulary can come together. And then you do pair work. Again, it's full sentences. May I please have your book? I'm sorry, I'm using it now, but I will give it to you later. Now, itna language, who's speaking so much language? So your English never gets fluent. And now if you tell me, no, I cannot say this because I have not taught the child the adverb, it's ridiculous, isn't it? So don't go with steps, go with holistic language. Holistic language is how you learned your mother tongue. Just look at what Mother Nature did. Mother Nature is a brilliant teacher. Every hard pictorial tonal language in the world is mastered by children by the time they are 1.5. Across the world, without exception. Learn from Mother Nature. Mother Nature will never go step by step. Just see what Mother Nature does and follow that. If your child goes from Gujarat to Bengal, he'll learn Bengali by playing cricket with children downstairs, not from the school. Because the school will take steps. The children playing there are doing practical stuff, need-based learning. So there are many things like that. So be holistic in your approach to language. Okay, anything else?
Yeah, ma'am, we have another question. Is there a way to remember phonetic symbols?
Phonetics, which grade are we talking about? Surely not 10th. These are parents' questions?
Yes, probably.
So when I learned English and you learned English, probably Vardi, when you learned English also, there was no phonetics. No, nobody had heard of phonetics. Phonetics is something that we imported. It's a problem that we imported into the country.
Okay.
And because we are such slaves, all of us jumped into the bandwagon because some white woman or white man brought it in. None of us learned it through phonetics. We are all reading, writing, speaking extremely well, aren't we? So throw the phonetics out. Phonetics is only good for understanding sound to letter connection. That is, if I put something like this, it's an A. A. This is it. C. This is all. Abhi wo A ke liye there are 5 sounds. A, A, all these are A sounds. I'm going to teach my 3-year-old all these sounds. How stupid is that? Tell me. Abhi apple ko dekh ke everybody will say apple. Nobody will say apple, apple and all that. Phonetic English is not a phonetic language. English, 75% of English is non-phonetic. Ye jo phonetics hai, it is a money-making business that they brought in. We did not have a reading problem. Think of your own school days. You'll never remember your mother saying somebody has a reading problem. Never. We never had it. We have imported it. Sight words is what you need to look at. Sight words is where you look at the whole word and you say that's the. Everywhere, all the children know the word exit because it's sitting in every theater. Everyone looks at M and says McDonald's, don't they? They're not reading it. They just know it's McDonald's. So sight words is the way to go. Phonetics is very, very little bit of phonetics for understanding letter to sound. Otherwise, throw the phonetics out of the window. They'll never learn to read through phonetics. They learn, some children read, some children don't read. So when they read, they say, see, phonetics has taught them. But trust me, phonetics is hard. English is non-phonetic.
Okay.
Drop it.
Okay, that was quite an insight, ma'am. One final question we have for today is, so it's very commonly heard by everyone that reading is a great way to improve the way we speak English, right? But how is it actually that reading leads to better English?
So reading is good for vocabulary. Reading is good for structure. So when you read a lot, you get a lot of ideas. So basically, English is made of ideas, which you will get from stories or reports or books or whatever you read. You get a lot of ideas. English is also about structures. Structures are entire sentences where the grammatical structure will give you meaning, isn't it? So you'll get a lot of a variety of structures when you read, and then finally vocabulary. So there are these 3 things that work together for any language: vocabulary, structure, and ideas. So when you read a lot of books, you get a lot of ideas, and you read a lot of structures, and you get a lot of vocabulary. But if you want to be fluent, as I said, you need to read aloud. I'm not saying you read the whole book aloud. So you read your books as you're reading. But every day for practice, take that newspaper, especially if you're in the higher classes, and read it aloud so that the tongue is doing the reading. The tongue is saying the words, because you can't drop a single word. Suppose there is a sentence that says, he went on a long walk in the deep dark forest or something like that. Now, if I'm reading it in my mind, I'll just read walk, forest. And I've got the meaning. He went for a walk in the forest. I've got it already by just reading walk in forest. Now, when we read books, this is how we read. So if you give me a 300-page book, I'm skimming through it. So when I read walk in forest, I've got it, and I'm moving to the next sentence. If I read every word of that book, I will take 1 year to read that book. So I'm reading it by skimming. I just look at it and I can read. I say I've read the sentence. Isn't that how we read? So we just look and we know what that line is. Because we're reading the most important words, the key words. But when you read aloud, I can't take that sentence and read walk forest. It'll sound stupid. If I say walk forest, doesn't sound correct. He went, I have to read the whole sentence. He went for a walk. I can't drop the a. If I say he went walk in the forest, it will sound again funny. So I have to read a. You see what I'm saying? So I won't drop my articles. Right. Otherwise, dropping the article is the most common mistake that most people make. They drop the article and their subject-verb agreement is gone for a toss. These are 2 major errors in spoken English. and in written English. So when you read aloud, I cannot read he went for long walk. I have to read he went for a long walk. Now, when I read enough number of times this and the, it becomes second nature. I automatically know that I have to put there. Matlab, that structure will flow in my mind, in my tongue, everywhere from my pen, that will automatically come in after before I write long walk. I went for long walk. मैं लिख नहीं पाऊंगी. I won't be able to write it like that. I will have to use the But if I'm learning it in from a grammar class or some coaching class or something where the teacher herself or himself is speaking wrong English, then I'm not listening also to good language. And then I'm not reading and I'm not hearing. So then I will drop the A. If I drop the A, the grammatical mistake will hit you in the face. Okay.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. This was the final question for today. And it was indeed a very insightful and informative session. Once again, thank you so much, Usha ma'am, for sparing your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope your students enjoyed it and I hope they got something out of it.
I'm sure they would have. I'm sure they would have. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.